my older child, being on my hip while I was cooking. And, she wasn't a very expressive child, but she looked at me and she was looking at me while I was cooking, and it was really hot. So I look at her, and then she kind of is staring at me like, And then she takes her tiny little two arms and she puts it around my neck, as if like, you're my person,
Mm-hmm.
And everything just dropped at that moment. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a mom.
You're listening to Cultureful. I'm your host, Jess Lynn. This is the fourth and final part of my conversation with Aisha Severy. In part 3, Aisha shared about losing her father in childhood, migrating to Kenya, and going to college and meeting her husband in the U.S. In this episode, we follow her and her husband as their relationship develops and they decide to marry. We also hear about her move back to Pakistan, the culture shock she experienced, and the challenges she faced in her career and motherhood. We close with her reflections on being a Muslim feminist, celebrating Eid, and finding home. This journey with Aisha moved me in ways I'm still processing. Her struggles are deeply relatable, and her observations humble yet profound. As always, you can find the video versions on YouTube. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back from the break.
Thank you.
Okay, so before the break, we left off right after you and your husband meet. The cutest frickin' meet cute that I've heard in a long time.
Oh.
Seriously, super cute. Basically, just to recap, like you met over the internet in a forum where you're both writing very passionately. And then you just happened to both be going to Pakistan from his East Coast school, your West Coast school. You were both going to Pakistan at the same time. You meet there for the first time. And then you mentioned Subway in the article that you wrote. Was Subway the first time that you met?
Alone.
That was the first alone meeting. Okay. So second base was for him to meet your brother.
They were in California.
Both brothers were in California at the time?
No, one of them was. So it's just one brother. But, assuming that they both had a joint counsel on the matter. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So he came to California to meet
my brother.
Your brother.
Mm.
But at this time, you also said it was kind of like an intellectual meeting of the minds. So what motivated him? So was he also just like, oh, but he wants more too?
Yeah. I think that's quite clear. And by this time, his friends are sort of like being like, that's interesting. What does this girl want? So when I met him in Lahore, his friends brigade, i.e. Tony Assaccino, who's passed away, unfortunately, recently, Prem, Tony was Italian American, Prem was Indian American, and Maria. These three people came to check me out, being like, who's this girl? What does she want? Is she good enough? And so when he came to California, obviously, like the understanding was that he's now going to go, into my people and get that sort of sorted. And before that, of course, we're just pretending that it's meeting of the minds, but it's also actually is meeting of the minds, but it's also not, So there's always this gray area in Eastern tradition mostly, which is like, just keep it, flow with it, see where it goes. Because if you want to then exit, you can. Because it'll be just like, oh, he just came to say hi to the family.
Like go with it without saying that it's a romantic thing. So then if it doesn't become anything, it's not a big deal.
And ideally, you don't want to make it a romantic thing until your elders sort of give you a nod. In his case, his friends.
Because those are his counsel that he had, right? Wow, interesting. Okay, so he came and met your brother before he took you, like you both went to Subway?
Yeah, before we went to Subway, yeah.
Okay. Tell us about that day.
I think, first of all, I don't remember it too well, except the fact that he got a sty in his eye. They got like some kind of like weird little popped pimple or whatever in his eye. And he showed up with a Band-Aid on his eye.
Huh. That's not as cute for his eyelashes.
And not at all. And also I was like, oh no, but also like, like it's just, it takes you down a few notches.
Mm-hmm.
But he did well. He, kept like, impressing everyone and having very strong opinions. And my brother kind of was like, okay, I mean, remember, my brothers are not parents. Like they've been thrust into this being parents of teenage sister, and they're parenting her, and poor, they don't know what they're doing, and they're going, they're feeding as they go. So they're like, okay, like, okay, this guy, whatever. Let's see where it goes. So then Yasser and I, after my classes in San Jose State, we meet at Subway. He waits for me to finish my classes. He meets me at Subway, and that's where, I remember the shirt he was wearing. I remember what he was saying. We had our Subway, and yeah, so we had that meeting, and of course, by this time, we're still not breaking it as, okay, we're a thing now.
Uh-huh. No one's making the first move into romantic territory.
Yeah. Except that when he goes back, and then we start chatting on this thing called IMCR. I don't know, for those who are in the 80s, like 80s kids, IMCR was the sort of like WhatsApp of today, but it had to be like, I don't know, it's kind of like a Discord server where you create a room and then you go in and meet in that room. So you hashtag something, and then that person knows that they're going to be in that room at a particular time. So then you go into that online room and then you chat. Except that anyone can join it if they have that name. So we had this name called Kharbuzi, which is a melon. In Urdu, there's an idiom or a proverb that says, Kharbuze ko dekh ke kharbuza rang pakarta hai, which means that a melon next to another melon gets colored by the same color. So it's basically like transference, So he called me Kharbuzi because he was like, whenever I say secular stuff, you become secular, like he's like, well, so it was this joke. So our IMCR room was Kharbuzi. For some reason, this other guy was also in that room.
Awkward.
Just so random and awkward. And so Yasser would spend a lot of time trying to chase him away, but he wouldn't go. And he would just listen to our conversations. And so,
like a chaperone.
There was no end to it. There really wasn't. It was just no alone. And so I think then he would just listen to our conversations. And at that point, I was like, you want to take this. I've always been very sort of direct. I also don't do well with anticipation anxiety. So I just like to say it. I'm like, what's your plan? What do you want? Like, I want this. What do you want? And I think I made the first sort of move, being like, I really like you. Remember, I had an agenda as well. So I had to get down to it. And I was like, and then we started emailing, and that's when things. So we mostly sort of like connected on email. And then the second trip that he made, was a bit more defined for my brothers and the family and me as well, being like, okay, this is getting to third base, which is then him introducing my brother to his mom back home in Lahore.
Oh, yeah. Wait. Third base was... everyone was back in Lahore at the same time?
No, my brother actually and my sister-in-law made a trip specially to go check out his mom.
Okay, because they were like, okay, this is getting serious.
Yeah. So they came back with a nod because his mom was a working mom, a very hardworking woman. So my brother said, you can't go wrong with that,
Aww.
Yeah. So, and then the wedding happened soon after, I think a year after. Yeah.
Year after?
A graduation. After my graduation, yeah. So he graduated a year before me and was in Pakistan for a year, and then I graduated. And as soon as I graduated, I got married. I graduated in May and I got married in December 2003.
So you guys were long distance?
Yeah. I forgot that. Mostly over email. All of it over email, mostly. Yeah.
Not on the phone?
And on the phone. And one most important timeline, which I must not forget, is that 9/11 happened during our long distance thing. So when he graduated, he couldn't find a job. So he could have stayed one extra year on his work permit, but he, after 9/11, there was just whatever. So he left a year earlier. And then, yeah, there was this push to get married sooner because, of course, staying apart was kind of hard. And there was this race against time because if it wasn't him, then they would marry me off into some cousin who was Indian Muslim or Kokni Muslim, and that was scary. because it would mean going back to a culture that I found like I didn't belong to.
Okay, so you got married in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
I guess so you spent like maybe about 6 months spending time in person together before you got married. Because I was just thinking like, well, you're coast to coast, and the in-person time is actually very little.
Very little, because he's doing his he's graduating. I'm studying. Yeah, it was very, very little. But we did manage to speak a lot on the phone, get into that IMCR chat room with the third person, watching our every move. And he would chime in and be like, nice, I like how you said that. He was so weird and creepy. We learned to ignore him after a while. And then obviously Yasser would visit once in a while to, he would miss me. And at that point, it got severely emotional because he was away from home. I became his home. He was, I didn't know that at the time, but he was obviously going through a major depressive bout. That's perhaps when the brain tumor started growing. It was a slow growing tumor. And according to his doctors, had been in him for a very long time, about 20 years. So I'm guessing his brain chemistry started changing around then. But those years in San Jose were what you call like the best years of both of our lives, because it was innocent and sweet. There was nothing complicating it. You just wanted someone who wanted you back and wanted to make a life with you. And it was as simple as that,
As a newly married couple, what were you and your husband's aspirations for your lives together?
So we thought we sorted it out before we got married, which is that, we're going to change the world, go back to our country, and just be contributing members of society at the top echelons. I mean, maybe be the prime minister or the president, Like, it was really dumb, but forgive us because we were 19 and 20. We'd send each other these 2 helicopters, these Black Hawks, which is a very political machine. And then just say, flying together and be like, oh, you're the president, I'm the prime minister. We're going to go, fight the enemy or something dumb like that. And we didn't think much about how that would pan out or what it meant, or, that there bills and taxes and you can get pregnant. And of course, like, we were just kids,
So it just big dreams. Wow. Okay.
Big dreams. None of the small stuff. And then you realize it's all about the small stuff. So we met, it was a bit of a miscalculation.
So did you at all think about like how many kids you wanted, when you wanted kids, like, how you might split tasks at home? That I think those all are kind of sound like they were the quote unquote small stuff to you.
Yeah, because if you're fixing the world, the rest of the stuff is going to work itself out.
It's going to fall into place.
It's going to fall into place. There's this one time, although we were at Johnny Rockets, we loved Johnny Rockets. He was in California, and there were these very rowdy white young boys like jumping over and then he's like, our kids are going to be so disciplined. And I said, I concur, And I'm laughing because it's, it was
wonderful parenting completed.
Check.
Yeah.
So we did want kids at some point. I was thinking of delaying that, until we figured things out, but that's not how it worked out.
Your kids came soon, right?
Almost 9-10 months after the marriage, yeah.
Were you living just the two of you somewhere, or were you living with other relatives and family?
Yeah, I was, so you marry into a joint family. So I was living with his family, his dad and mom. Yeah.
Your 2 kids arrived back to back.
Back to back, yeah.
At that point, when you had the 2 young kids, were you working? Were you navigating career, motherhood, family dynamics all at the same time?
So when I think landed in Lahore in 2003, I didn't know what I was getting into. All I knew was I was being guided by this hand of God, and everything would be okay. But when I landed, I think I was just really fish out of water, because I thought Pakistan was Karachi, and Karachi is where my family came from, and that's a different culture. And Lahore was very different. Karachi is more metropolitan. very progressive,
It's much huger too, population-wise,
huger.
right? It's
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
coast. I did do some homework.
Good job, good job. And also the way you say Pakistan, it's exactly like Pakistan. It's how it's supposed to be said. Thank you for that research too.
Wait, no, I didn't research that. I just hear how you say it, and then how do other people say it? Pakistan?
Pakistan.
Oh. No, I
Pakistan.
don't have a clip on my nose, so I don't need that much nasal sound.
So yeah, a total like different culture. And then I realized, note to self, Pakistan is not Karachi, you know. A lot of learning curve there because Lahore was a more feudal, more insular place where class divides were very pronounced. In Karachi, they're not. I didn't even know my family was poor or rich, and I didn't grow up understanding poverty or wealth in the sense. But that's the first thing you kind of need to know if you're in Lahore. Where do you fall on that scale of class? So where you live is very important in Lahore. So one of the things I realized was that my in-laws were educated, but they were not rich. Now, that's not a problem for me, but it was a problem for upward mobility because it's a society that only values a certain kind of privilege. It's very gated, it's very colonial, even though it's not colonial anymore. The wealthy have just taken on a very British-esque perspective on the rest of the peasants who are not rich. So if you're rich in Lahore, you're going to go to golf in the morning. You're going to do polo at some point on the weekend. Your wives who don't work will take a couple of trips to Singapore. You're going to be educated in one of the Ivy Leagues, and you're going to be part of the ruling class, either as a minister or as a CEO of one of the major organizations. And then you have most of your wealth abroad. Now, my in-laws and us were people wedded to the land. His mom's side of the family was feudal. His dad's side of the family were like in the car business. So they were Lahore, my mother-in-law was the first person to be educated in her family as a woman, and her sisters. She went in a burqa to the King Edward Medical College. She became a doctor. That was unheard of,
Wow.
Went from a village to the city. So this is like major groundbreaking stuff, right? So Lahore was everything for them. And they had made it from 0 to 1, but the city in which they were living in was extremely I realized this when people would ask me, where am I living? And I would tell them where I'm living. And they would consider that to be on the other side of the river, as colloquially speaking.
Or like on the other side of the tracks.
So I found that really strange to rise above. First of all, I didn't believe in it myself. I thought you would just work hard and make your way up. But I realized that's, whatever, I would keep hitting these glass ceilings because of people you'd interact with. And I ended up really not liking Lahore. Hating it, in fact, unfortunately. Part of it is the heat. It gets really hot in Lahore. And if you're not wealthy and you're not going to crunch up those AC bills, then it gets very uncomfortable, especially as a young mom or as somebody who's working after work and going to work in a rickshaw and coming back and all of that. Although I would get, my father-in-law had the best car. So the day he would drop me, I'd go in a SUV. Or a Merc or a BMW, and then the next day it would be a rickshaw. So I was okay and comfortable navigating between ups and downs, but I really loathed the way people saw me because that would keep me from moving up or being seen, and being seen in that part of the world is very important. I really didn't like it. I didn't make many deep friendships. I was too knee deep in motherhood, and it was very, very isolating. It was just me and my mother-in-law raising the kids. There was no sense of community, no parks to go to with the girls. Lahore is very urban, but still very gentrified, if I may. There are areas that are for rich people, there are areas that are for middle class people, and there are areas that are for poor people. We were very much on the upper middle class all throughout, and eventually made it to the intellectual elite. So by the time Yasser and I were done with Pakistan, I would say people heard us when we spoke, and we managed to break all those barriers, maybe mostly because of our writing and our thoughts. But it wasn't fun to get there because it really burned us out. He was a lawyer and he wanted to be a lawyer, but he would find that, anybody in the field that had their own dads or their uncles pre-existing in it would have an added advantage, So those things were not fun. I mean, going back from America to Pakistan, thinking we're just going to take your egalitarian values on merit and then just make it happen there. It's not how it worked out. We realized why people moved the other direction,
Mm-hmm.
and that we were idealistic, but we were still, it was Musharraf's era. President Musharraf was a general before he became the president. Of course, our country is known for its military coups. And we bought into his whole enlightened moderation and, oh, Pakistan's going to be the next 11 economies of the world and we will rise with it and, that kind of stuff. So it's not that we were not accurate in our assessment. It could have gone that way. But I think what we learned was culture and economic conditions are very, like, they pull you like gravity down. There's very little you can do on your own,
Wow, what a metaphor.
Someone had to clean the toilets, someone had to bear the heat, someone had to go to work. And between all of that, there was very little time to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wait, so you were doing childcare with your mother-in-law, and you were also going to work in a rickshaw, or sometimes your father-in-law would take you. What work were you up to?
I started off in a startup company, recruiting, sort of like the PakistanMonster.com equivalent. And then I worked for the government of Punjab. So I worked for who is now the current the current Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif. So he was sort of my boss. I was the Director General for Marketing and Communication at the investment arm of the government. So I slowly started feeling my way into the city, mostly because of who I am and the fact that I am an extrovert. But I wanted to get out very quickly. So eventually I moved to Islamabad for work. And Islamabad is neither Karachi nor Lahore. It's its own vibe. It's a diplomatic city. It's lush, it's green. The heat is bearable, easier place to raise the girls. So yeah, I sort of like took more charge later in my life and started making a life of the one I wanted in Pakistan, similar to probably what my parents did in Uganda, created an ecosystem that they wanted. So chose my friends, chose the life I wanted, raised my girls how I wanted. So
you moved with your daughters, and did your husband?
Yeah, my husband and my mother-in-law as well. Yeah.
And your father-in-law?
My father-in-law unfortunately passed about, I think, 6-7 years into the marriage. Yeah, he had a heart attack. That was also very sad for me because he became sort of my father figure. And unlike my dad, who had a motorbike, he had the coolest cars. So, and he had an affinity to me. He always protected me and took care of me like a dad, So his passing did do a number on me, although I didn't have time to grieve him because Yasser and my mother-in-law were very broken after his passing.
You had to be strong for them.
Mm.
So you wanted to move to Islamabad, and then the whole family moved was it like a job, or was it like you just wanted to move to a different town and start over, and then you went and found a job there?
So what I found is that it was very hard for me to keep a job, so I would get there, but then I think I would intimidate a lot of people, because I had this very American ethic. And this is where I feel like my American side was underplayed. I was very American, in how I think and how I approach things and how that foundational college education was not just a passing through. It made an impact on me. Similarly, Nairobi was not me passing through. It made an impact on me. Kokni Muslims are not just anyone. They are my family now,
Mm-hmm.
So what you realize as you get older is whatever you think you're done with is not done with you. So,
and even when you pass through somewhere, we're affected by the sum of all of our experiences, right?
Absolutely. And so that was a realization where I was like, okay, everyone here in Pakistan thinks I'm too American. And those were values I wanted to keep, such as how do you talk to staff?
Mm-hmm.
These were feudal and colonial cultures, so they really talked down to people, like very insulting, and it was normalized, and I just could not be okay with that normalization of that behavior. Mostly because my parents were not like that, even though they were in Africa. There was, like I said, there was a sense of equality with everyone that you assimilated with. So I didn't understand how someone can work in your house or in your office and then just got bossed around like, like a field slave or a home slave. That was so retrogressive and backwards and also outlawed, but the culture allowed for it and encouraged it. In fact, till the last year of the 20 years, I kept fighting that tooth and nail. And then I think a lot of the conflicts within the household were based on that as well.
Aisha shares her take on motherhood, being a Muslim feminist, how she celebrates Eid, and more after the break. What was your approach to motherhood?
You have so much to say about how your parents parented you. So much to say about that. And then you become a parent and you make their mistakes and your own combined.
You think that's how the math works?
Oh, I think, I always knew it was hard. Like, don't get me wrong. I didn't go in thinking, okay, this is going to be easy. But the mindset with which I approached parenting, I think I really messed up because I was like, okay, you know what? Kids should be raised by a community. It takes a village. I don't know why that was in my head. I think somebody was saying it over and over again in the airwaves those days. So I was like, oh, it takes a village. So let's get the village to raise my kids.
The saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," is an African proverb. Hillary Clinton popularized it in the US with her 1996 book called It Takes a Village and Other Lessons Children Teach Us. But the wisdom behind the saying is much older. The idea that raising children is the shared work of a community.
So my mother-in-law, the maids, and by the way, that's not very uncommon. There's enough literature in the Indian Pakistani cultures, which is like people who need labor, need to be paid for their labor. You help them, and then you also help raise your children, especially for working women. And so with my mother-in-law's supervision, and we had hired help. The kids were in the house; they raised. But then you look back and you're like, that was not good for them or for me. There was a lot of separation anxiety. There was a lot of messes. I think there was abuse as well from the maids towards my kids.
Oh, so the maids were also the nannies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they do everything. Yeah? They live in your house. They're like live-in maids, live-in nannies. So you just assume that someone you trust wouldn't harm the kids, but they did. But also, I think I was going through postpartum, which now we have vocabulary for. Back then we didn't. I think the shock of moving to Lahore and things not working out my way, and me feeling like I made a mistake and I disappointed my dad, and also this confusion about what were you on to, like sort of being like, why did you bring me here, dad?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm talking to no one, but I think that there's someone there. So I'm just confused about what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Why isn't it working? Why am I not being liked? And a lot of rejection. So similar to Nairobi, just being like, I just did not fit in a culture where, and I should have known this, where women, on the gender index, we are second worst country in the world for women's empowerment. Mm-hmm. So I should have known that someone like me would struggle. Somehow I thought with a liberal husband and a working mother-in-law and Pakistan on an upward mobility track, that would not be a problem. But of course it was. I hit a wall every single time I went to work. I took public transport. I interacted with any family outside of ours. And that also came across in parenting. So I think that postpartum depression came from there. I wasn't a very involved mom. I wasn't even connected, unfortunately, to my first child as much as I was to the second one. It took a while for me to figure out I'm a mom, I remember my older child, being on my hip while I was cooking. And, she wasn't a very expressive child, but she looked at me and she was looking at me while I was cooking, and it was really hot. So I look at her, and then she kind of is staring at me like, And then she takes her tiny little two arms and she puts it around my neck, as if like, you're my person,
Mm-hmm.
And everything just dropped at that moment. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a mom. I'm her dad. I'm her mom. Like, like what I felt towards my dad. And so that moment helped me come back to embodying motherhood a bit better. I kept failing along the way.
What do you mean by failing? What was, I guess, like your standard for yourself that you weren't meeting, or like, why did you feel like you were failing?
Because I think there's a lot of literature on this and psychology that tells you that you will raise children like you were raised. So I think there was a lot of Nairobi in me. I think there was a lot of rejection parenting in me, disciplinary parenting in me. As much as I hated it for myself as a child, I just passed it on unknowingly because I was like, okay, if they're disciplined, then they're good. Corporal punishment, as much as I hated it, there was a sense of, okay, you can't let a child be not afraid of you, otherwise they'll do something wrong. Very fear-based parenting. And by the way, superbly normalized. So it wasn't like I was doing something so unusual. It was just how everyone did it. But now I know the standard is that you should not hurt your child deliberately. And your one job is to love them.
And make them feel safe.
Yeah, and just not even safety, like beyond safety, until their creativity oozes, until they go running about on top of trees and swings and mountains. And like I got for that initially, but what I realized was that I embodied fear is easier to embody than love. So the only thing I've done right by them, I think, is self-awareness. Thankfully, they've turned out to be extraordinary children, despite me, and I say me because, of course, parenting is not mothering. I also had a husband who was supposed to be a parent to them, but because he was sick, I think I just took on both roles. So therefore, the responsibility to do good by them should have happened. But I think that in the end, I kind of did, and they did this to me. They created accountability for me, being like, you sucked, mom. And I think I had enough humility to say, yeah, I did. I'm sorry. Especially after I wrote the book, because it gave me an opportunity to give myself some grace about the fact that what I did in Pakistan and what I was dealing with in Pakistan was very difficult. So I then forgive myself a little bit. And so therefore I could take their wrath, take their anger, take their accountability. And it's terrible because it's not like they're going to be healed just because I'm accountable now. They're still going to deal with, a parent who was angry or removed or emotionally unavailable. But ever since those realization moments, I've tried to make it up as much as I can.
I want to wrap up with a few reflection questions. Listener, you will see in the description links to the article that I have been referencing, as well as to the book that Aisha wrote called Heart Tantrums, a feminist memoir on misogyny and marriage. And it kind of digs more into this chapter of marriage, right? Marriage and your husband battling brain tumors that basically in 2017, he got diagnosed with a golf ball sized brain tumor, had to get that surgically removed. It came back a few years later, had to get it removed again. Anyway, listener, this is all in the book. So check the book out. I want to wrap up with a few reflection questions about how you identify as a Muslim feminist. How would you describe your brand of Muslim feminism? And now that we've heard your bio, I feel like there's so many points in time where I feel like it was developing. How do you think of how it developed throughout your life?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. Again, not one I've been asked before. So Muslim feminist, I got described this because the publishers at Hearst and Penguin thought that it would sell better with a white audience,
and what?
And an Indian audience as opposed to feminist, they're like, put Muslim in there, it'll sell. But I do feel that there is some truth to that because Fatma Mirnesi is a Muslim feminist, and Amna Wadud, these are people who are Muslim feminists. They've sort of paved the way. And what they believe is that you don't have to completely throw away your cultural identity to embody another idea, which is that women should not be a rug mat, which is what feminism is. So I do agree that I am a Muslim feminist. I think my life has integrated in that direction. I would not really start with Muslim simply because, of course, there are theologians and there are people who've really practiced the religion well. And I don't as much as I should or I'm supposed to. What I do is, practice the Islam that my mom and dad taught me, which is, that God's in your heart and people's heart. And so don't break it, and so to be a good Muslim, you just, take care of other people, try not to hurt them, do good by them. And I think that the reason I needed feminism was because I needed to also do good by myself. Women are constantly caregivers. They're constantly giving, and they're valued for their giving, for their cleaning, for their service, for their labor. A lot of it is unseen. And the reason I needed to put feminism in front of that Muslim is because everything needs a balance, and there's a war on women in our lifetime. There's no doubt about it. United Nations, talks about how it's a health epidemic. These gender wars where, the women are actually really suffering at the hands of men's anger and insecurity. So how do we create more equal opportunities? How do we make sure that not just in households, in our mosques, in our temples, in our universities and governments, that women are on the decision-making table, not just passing out and decreeing laws that men want them to do. Excuse me for saying this, like my aunts, for instance, they were not doing things to me or telling me to do things because they thought it was a cool idea. They thought for men, this is a great idea to keep women in check, to keep women subdued, to keep women, subservient. And so I just feel that their lives would have been better had someone had asked them things like you're asking me. How were you as a child? Who are you? What do you want to do? What are your dreams? Instead of them just being conduits to what makes men comfortable, being so afraid of men's anger. Oh, your uncle's going to get angry if you do this. Would you get angry if I do this? What do you think? That they're completely erased. And so that's why I feel I needed feminism for my being Muslim, and I needed Muslim for my being feminism, because that's who I am. And there is no discord between the two, at least as I'm getting older. When you're younger, you're so rigid about, this definition or that definition. When you're older, you're like, Muslim, sure. Feminist, sure. Muslim feminist, sure. Bring it on. Because I'll probably be someone else in the next 5 years, or maybe I won't. I don't know. Like, so much changes, so much beats you down, and you become a different person. So right now, as things stand, I feel like both these traditions have so much to offer the world. And just the brand of Islam that my parents practiced, which is, giving, community, don't break people's hearts, don't be mean,
In wrapping up, the other thing that I wanted to ask you, also from your article, I really enjoyed that article and I read it closely. You mentioned that even though you've been through a lot of hard times, you also had some really beautiful times that were consistently beautiful. And one of those things that you mentioned that was a consistently positive thing was Eid and celebrating Eid. And so how did your celebration of Eid change as you grew up and migrated between all these different cultures and countries?
In Uganda, we wouldn't have too much Eastern wear, or what you call shalwar kameez, right? So they would be hand-me-downs from cousins, right? But on Eid day, you got to buy your own clothes. Wow. So your own sandals, your own, shalwar kameez. My mom did Mehndi on my hand,
The salwar kameez is a traditional outfit from South Asia with roots in Persian and Mughal clothing. It pairs loose trousers called salwar with a long tunic, the kameez. Originally designed for comfort and ease of movement, it became popular across North India, Pakistan, and beyond. Today, it is commonly worn in South Asia, especially in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, and by diaspora communities worldwide, both in daily life and styled elaborately for celebrations. And the terms Mehndi and henna are sometimes used interchangeably, but Mehndi refers to the art of applying temporary designs using a dye made from the henna plant. Its history dates back thousands of years, originating in ancient Egypt and later spreading to South Asia, where it became central to weddings, festivals, and rites of passage. Today, it is common across South Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa, with designs varying regionally, all symbolizing beauty, joy, and blessing.
She was very artistic, but for some reason, the mehndi or the ink, I think most people know what mehndi is. She used to really like cut corners. She used to do this one round circle and like just put mehndi on my fingertips, which I hated because most other moms did very intricate patterns, cutting corners on mehndi, taking photographs. I loved those, just posing at behind a concrete wall for Eid, being like, Eid was about photographs. And I think that that's where my love for photos comes from, because I'm just like, moments are so fleeting, but on Eid, you got to sit and take the pictures, which means you have to dress up, you have to look good and, do girly things. And most of my life, I've been not doing girly things, right? But Eid was when I actually enjoyed it. So I love the smell of mehndi, to a point where I sometimes suspect I got married just to put mehndi on my hands. It smells so good and it's so beautiful and intricate. So that's when I become very, feminine. And I think our culture is like really flamboyant with the colors and, the laces and the dupattas. And so you get to do that. So that was Uganda, and Kenya similarly. America, this time around, because I've just migrated, I didn't know when Eid was except a night before, because it's moon sighting. And although they know whether the moon is there or not, but somebody has to look at it and find it from the clouds, which leaves a lot to, chance. So maybe there's Eid, maybe someone sights it. And so it was just like it happened the night before, tomorrow's Eid. And my daughters were insisting that we go and get them clothes. And I was so not in the mood. I was feeling like, dispossessed, if you will, like a bit lost in Atlanta. But they forced me anyway. They're like, we're going to go get clothes. And then we had a photo shoot. I think there are certain things and traditions that make me happy. And when my girls dress up, they look so beautiful and so gorgeous, and they have such a great fashion sense, and they're like, the whole makeup and thing. And mehndi. So I put mehndi on my own hands, and they put it on each other's. Theirs was much better. So there is something to be said about the little things. And that's the one, if I can summarize my thesis of life, it's like, you can change the world, sure, but it has to start by scrubbing the floor and washing the dishes in the sink and being nice to children and putting mehndi on your hands.
Now in 2025, you've super recently moved to Atlanta, I think like 2-3 months ago or something. And in our pre-meeting, you were talking about how finding home, and it was coming up also in this conversation, right? So it's coming up about like the sense of wanting to find home as a big thing in your life. In 2025 now, what does home mean to you? Do you think you found home? How do you think of home?
My idea of home has shifted, because I realized that you can move away from so many things, but you take so many things with you. So I brought my anxiety with me. I brought my past with me. I brought my baggage with me. I also brought my free-spiritedness with me. So I've so realized that geography has nothing to do with it, But yeah, of course, context matters. So now what I think of home is poetry, good friendships like yours, groups like Badass Asian Women, which we both are, trees, mountains, the moon, things that are a bit immovable. Like your friendship or your moments with me, they're a bit like eternity-esque, because they have already happened. They're meaningful. No one can take them away. And so I pin home to less movable things, which is why I think my dad's passing is such a big lesson in my life, and my husband's illness is such a big lesson in my life. Because people can be alive, but they cannot necessarily be there.
Mm-hmm.
versus people can go, but they are there. So therefore, it's what you want to keep alive that makes home. Does that make sense?
It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Yes, it makes sense. And it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jess. This is amazing. This is just absolutely amazing. And I'm so glad that we did this. And I'm so glad to be part of, all the people that you've interviewed are elite women because they have a hybridized identity. And it's hard to do that. They're so courageous. They're so amazing, as are you. You're amazing. So I am honored. I don't know what I did to deserve this. Maybe I was nice to a cat. But this is a gift.
That your mother smelled in the
Yeah,
backyard.
that my mother smelled. Yeah, this is a huge gift. I'm very, very grateful because stories are what. Yeah, I forgot to say that, but stories are home.
I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate that you showed up very authentically and like with a lot of vulnerability, and you opened up on a lot of things. And thanks for letting us get to know you.
Thank you for letting me get to know me.
Oh,
yeah.
Heart,
No, really.
Heart.
Really, I've never been asked these questions. Yeah,
Too
now.
many beautiful things to end on. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and the full 4-part series with Aisha. You'll find links to connect with Aisha and her book in the description. In honor of Latinx Heritage Month in the US, which is September 15th until October 15th, my next guest is Taryn, a third-generation Mexican-American from California. It was such a treat to interview her. Taryn is a close friend I served with in the Peace Corps in Zambia, and her family is one of the most vibrant and active in the community that I know. We trace the migration stories of both sides of her family, learn about her parents growing up in a farm town and how they met, and explore family celebrations and traditions. It's a story of rebuilding a life in a new place, navigating assimilation, seeing how culture and identity evolve across generations, and how she and her siblings are now reconnecting with their roots. Be sure to subscribe or follow and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. If you enjoyed this episode, there are a few ways to support this homegrown indie podcast. Share the episode with a friend. Word of mouth really helps us grow. Donate via the link in the description to help keep these stories of representation coming. And leave a review. I love hearing from you. A big thanks to Rachel C. Reiki for commenting, enjoying listening to these episodes. Also, a special thank you to Badass Asian Women, a Metro Atlanta club of Asian American women who build collective strength and organize events like the one where Aisha and I connected. This episode was produced and edited by me, with advising and executive production support from Ruben Yana Ruben. I'm Jess Lynn. See you soon.